Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this week's Life Design Roundtable. Today we're going to talk about creating harmony, the ways to do that in our lives. It's so great to see you all. Hi, Jonathan. You're wide awake in a bright red sweatshirt.
Yeah, I am. Even though it's still early on the early side where
Yes,
I live, it's
it
still.
is early and it's freezing here. Well, not really freezing. It's about 50, but we have 15-mile-an-hour winds right now. There's a cold wind blowing down from Colorado. So that's what's happening in Austin. How about you, Dean?
Yeah, it's been snowing this morning a little bit, but I think it seems to have stopped, and we'll probably not have anything left on the ground by the evening.
Yeah, so tomorrow's a national holiday, a federal holiday. And Brian, but they don't celebrate President's Day in Vietnam.
They don't. We just finished celebrating Tet, which is the Lunar New Year, which is big here. But yeah, the sun's coming out again. It was rainy for a little bit, so I've been walking around because it's been sunnier. So
Fun. Well, okay.
yeah.
It's great to see you all, and we'll get started on a couple of talking points and then some funny memes, and then we'll discuss creating harmony. Okay, I'm going to share. Here we are. Okay, so was a picture of like feng shui minimalism, where a decorator was creating some harmony in the space. So for some people, that's harmony. Let's go to our next slide. Okay, so these are the ways Brian and I did some brainstorming, and I'll have some research notes in the show notes below. The ways to create harmony in your life. What sort of sectors of your life do you want to have harmony? So family and friends, can we squash a beef between people that are not getting along or just see them separately, how to create harmony with family and friends? Your physical spaces, like the image that we showed. Most of the people that are in the decluttering business, tell you that you have more harmony in your life overall if your space is harmonious. If you don't turn your attention to stuff everywhere or things are not tidy or clean. Harmony with nature. So Maddie has taught us a lot about this, how to be responsive to the changes in seasons, to the wildlife around you, to feel when the birds call the morning, to feel harmony with that. Clients and colleagues, of course, finding solutions where things have some friction. I think we understand that friction happens from time to time, no matter what, but harmonizing that is a good skill to have. Heart and mind harmony. We have an interesting looking drawing in the memes in the next slide about that, but they are currently calling it coherence. Heart and mind coherence, where the two are operating together in harmony. And then harmony with self, that you are not saying mean things to yourself every day or not giving yourself a chance to succeed, holding yourself back, not giving yourself permission to explore possibilities, whatever that might look like. So those are some jumping off points for our discussion. And now to the memes. Okay, in this first meme, and I should have put present. Here we go. Sorry. Um, on the top left, realizing that not every moment in life will be deep or meaningful or vibrating with energy that would give him the fulfillment he'd always hoped for, Todd unloaded the dishwasher. Well, he's creating harmony. He's putting things back where they belong, clean and tidy. So we could do that. Below, we have a little mouse. Edna was not genetically predisposed to housekeeping. Not only is everything a mess, it looks a little dirty too. She's not with the program in the harmony. And I love this drawing. Here's a person who's mostly made up of squiggly lines, holding hands with a person who's mostly made up with a collection of clouds. Somehow they created harmony together. And then here's a picture of the brain and the heart and someone stroking strings to create harmony between the two. And here's our philosophy meme. Good enough. Mediocrities.
Mhm.
He was not a real philosopher. And the last one, don't you think social media is ruining conversation? The grandmother says, the granddaughter says, like. So I think so. Okay. Well, we have some jumping off points. Would anybody like to go first? I usually start with Brian. Are you good to go?
Yeah. Does someone else want to start this week? We can mix it up, or I can.
Go
I'm
for it.
fine. Yeah, I'm fine if you start. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start. All right, cool. So creating harmony. One thing I think is that I think would be cool to see that I don't really see is in groups, like at work or just groups of friends or whatever. Um, when people are thinking about like what to do or what's the plan, I think it's good if one sort of social skill that can create harmony in this situation, I think, is kind of getting a sense of what the different good things that people want to do are and sensing like what has the most enthusiasm behind it or the most excitement behind it and kind of just going with that. Because that's like the way I see it is that's the energy you need to sustain action. It's usually not going to be like somebody creates some rational plan and everyone just like follows it. So if you can kind of sense like what are people excited about or enthusiastic about, and let's kind of work with that, I think that helps create harmony within the group. So that's something I would mention. I also think, I came across this concept from video from Carrie Kay that you shared with me, Mom. And it's this concept of energetic sovereignty, kind of finding sort of an intuitive way to be sovereign in your own emotions, in your own energy. And kind of, I think when you can do that, you don't have the need to convince other people that you're right, which creates more harmony. Like you can just let them be however they want to be, uh, because you don't like fear them doing something that's going to mess you up because you just feel like you're good. So I feel like that's another aspect to creating harmony is if you can sort of intuitively find that place in yourself where you just have that energetic sovereignty. You just feel good, and then you can let other people be who they are. Um, Sometimes I think it's best for people to separate to create more harmony. So here's something I've been saying for a while. Because of all the political divisiveness in the US, for a while I've been saying we have to create two different United States, like just red and blue. Like, because it was getting to a point where it was like there's so much disharmony. Everyone who's blue, go to the left side of the US. Everyone who's red, go to the right side. Like, if it's going to be that combative, sometimes you almost have to separate to create harmony. It's good if you can work it out together, but sometimes you actually just need like maybe we kind of need to go our separate ways and it'll be more harmonious that way. So sometimes I think that's what's needed. And in relationships too, sometimes same thing. Sometimes you need space. But one thing I've noticed is sometimes in relationships, you can take space from each other, but it feels harmonious. Like when both parties agree that this is a good thing to do, this will probably help things, and everyone's on board, we're all on the same page. It actually feels harmonious when you separate. Other times, though, you can separate and it feels bitter and it feels like we didn't want it to go this way, but whatever, we're forced in this position. So the harmony is more, I think, about the feeling of it than it is about the actual state of affairs. You can separate harmoniously, or you could be together harmoniously. It's more about the feeling of both parties involved. Um, Another thing that's interesting is there are some like intellectuals, and I forget who they are, but I remember watching a video about this, who have argued that human relationships kind of mirror chemistry. So certain chemicals you mix together, it creates an explosion. Like certain people just necessarily aren't going to mix. Just it's just going to blow up. Other chemicals, you mix them together, it creates a new chemical. Like it mixes and creates a new substance. So that would be like a harmonious relationship. It creates a new thing. There's like a new dynamic between the two people.
Mhm.
Other things like oil and water, they just don't mix. You can put them in the same room. It just doesn't, it's just not going to resonate. It's not going to vibe. So I think it's interesting to kind of think of human relationships in that way, in like a chemistry type way. Because I do think to some extent it mirrors the way different relationships between people can go. Um, and another thing I wanted to mention is there was something I believe from Schopenhauer, and it was kind of maybe someone added this to his work and created this term, but it was like this. It's sort of like the porcupine social theory, and it was this idea that people can get too prickly to the point where they can't come together. Like if you have too many spines sticking out, you guys aren't going to be able to like get too close without it being a problem. And so um, I think this is true if people are very opinionated. Like if you have a strong, sharp opinion on everything, that's like one of those spines sticking out. And so like anytime someone brings up that topic, if they don't agree with you, it's going to create this disharmony, right? So I think in some situations, like especially at work, I always found is it was way better to just like not have opinions. Like your job, just don't be opinionated because then you can get along with all your coworkers very easily. If you really like, I mean, you could be opinionated like at home or with your friends. I always found at work, just I don't have opinions, just whatever. You can just think whatever. And then I could just get along with everyone and enjoy my job without like there being all this animosity at the job. I think that's a really good social skill for career, like for work environments. Um, and then, yeah, lastly, I'll just say, as far as like creating harmony within yourself, if you have conflicting sides of yourself, try to find a way to resolve that so you create internal harmony. Like, you know, one way to do that is just decide. Like, just decide, like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go this way and just go that way. And that's one way to resolve the conflict. Like, if you stay kind of sitting on the fence, I kind of think this, but I kind of think that, you're allowing that internal conflict to go on and on and on and on, right? Sometimes it's good to just pick a side, go with that, see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, you can change later. You can course correct later, but at least you learn something new, you resolve that internal conflict, you created internal harmony so you could move forward, you know? So yeah, that's what I would say. Anyone else want to jump in? Dean or
Uh,
Jonathan or
I
Mom?
didn't know the Schopenhauer theory, social theory about
Yeah.
porcupines, but I did once have
Yeah.
an emerging leader, and
Mhm.
she was like as smart as two people put together. She was very brilliant, but very young. And when you find young, brilliant people, sometimes they can have hard edges. Like they just want people to do what they say because they can see 3 steps or 4 steps ahead. But older people are like, I'm not going to do what you say. You're 11. You know what I mean? Not really, but I have 10 years on the job. You've been here 10 minutes. Sit down. So, but her mentor at this job called her a porcupine, labeled her a porcupine.
Wow.
And she said in our first session, I've been called a porcupine because I can be prickly. And I said, well, it sounds like you have sharp needles. You can be sharp in the things that you say, and they might hate you for being right. That happened to her a lot. But I said, we can dull some of those, and there's a time for retracting the needles. They
Yeah.
don't always have to be pointed and ready to, protect you from danger. So there's a way to soften, how you interact with others and polish a leader identity instead of a young whippersnapper know-it-all identity, which seems to be what you've polished. So, but yes, I've been labeled a porcupine. So, yeah, so very good. We'll have to look up the Schopenhauer theory. Jonathan, do you have any thoughts yet, or do you want to
Yeah.
take a little more time?
No, yeah, I was actually thinking, it's related to what Brian was saying, but the easiest way in my experience to experience harmony, it is understanding yourself better. What makes you angry, what makes you happy, all kinds of things that you feel, understanding where it's coming from. Uh, it really puts you in a state that it doesn't matter where you go, you can at least not add to the chaos. So it helps a lot to understand yourself. Uh, it you become like naturally harmonious. There's no way um, the universe doesn't want to interact with that energy and play with that kind of energy. So it's, yeah, understanding yourself. And then people can ask, well, but how do I understand myself better? How can I uh, do that? And then for that, there are different methods, all kinds of methods. But regardless of the method that someone chooses, it's as long as they understand themselves deeper, that itself creates like it makes the bubble bigger, pretty much. So instead of like your bubble being like petite with your thought process and your ideas, which more likely are going to be very limited, it expands them. So
Very good. That's lovely. Well, Dean, you might have some thoughts.
I got two or three things to say. First of all, mention a book because I know we like to mention books for people that might be helpful. There is a very fascinating book called Schopenhauer's Porcupines, and it is a
Tell me
book
how you spell Schopenhauer.
Schopenhauer,
Okay.
I think.
So it's a German name, German spelling.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. But this book is written by a psychoanalyst, and it takes a very sort of psychoanalytic approach to basically case studies that this woman has worked with. And it's very interesting portraits of like the mysterious ways that people change.
Oh.
So people listening to this podcast might actually be interested in that. When you were showing the memes earlier of the man made up of squiggles and the clouds and or whatever,
The harmony from different people.
it reminded me of this cartoon that I loved as a child, which the last time I checked it was on YouTube, called The Dot and the Line. Do you know this story?
never
The
never
dot
heard of it.
the dot is just this she's bouncing around the world and she's a lovely free spirit, and the line is in love with her. But he is kind of uptight, straight-laced, and undeveloped.
He needs straight lines.
And along comes the squiggle, who is hip and wild, undisciplined, dangerous, risky. And the dot falls in love with the squiggle. And she goes away with the squiggle. And the line, in his despair, finds through hard self-discipline that he can, if he wants, create an angle. And when he creates the angle, he learns to create ever greater levels of complexity and harmony. So that he is no longer a squiggle. He's better than the squiggle because now he can become any beautiful shape he wants. Right?
That's awesome.
So as he progresses up this ladder of development and harmony, right? Because the difference between the squiggle and the line is what the line is creating, all those are harmonious shapes. And the dot decides she loves the line in the end.
Aw.
So brought that to mind as an illustration, I think,
Mhm.
of like what it might look like to become an ever more harmonious
Mhm.
person. And I was thinking too, just about how so many of the people I work with in coaching, almost all of them sort of think they want a more harmonious situation, but part of the problem, the human problem, is that we're actually kind of ambivalent about that. Excuse me, I'm still recovering. Because in most situations, harmony lies on the other side of some difficulty. And so people come and they're really conflicted, and that conflict puts itself forward most frequently as anxiety because they think they don't know what they need to do, when in fact, what they need is just they need greater clarity because they kind of do know what they need to do to create more harmony. But that involves admitting difficult things to yourself, maybe about yourself or about other people you're in relationship with. It means admitting what you want and what you don't want.
Mhm.
It means asserting what you want and you don't want in relationships with others. And those things are can be very frightening when you are a person kind of inward, whose kind of inward life is a squiggle, right?
Mhm.
And and that so in a sense, the process of getting clarity, clarifying your boundaries, clarifying your desires, goals, etc., and beginning to assert those, that's the metaphor for the line making angles and the line sort of becoming these more harmonious shapes. That's the process of development by which we move to becoming a sort of broader, bigger, more complex, multi-angled beings. And it's hard and it's scary because you've just been used to being a squiggle. And before you can even get to the harmony, you got to get a lot of things straightened out to just become a line. And I just find that part of the coaching process is walking people through clarifying all those things that they are having difficulty seeing, and then offering some support as we try to begin making those inward changes. Because I think, as Brian said, Jonathan too, all that sort of external harmony in your relationships and in your environment even grows out of your own inner congruity, your integrity, basically, right? The way that you have integrated all of those parts of yourself around a kind of commitment to the truth that allows you to see and say who you are. And then once that happens, other people can see who you are. And that will repel some people and it will attract some people. And the people it attracts are the people with whom you have a potential for harmony. And so you got to start inwardly. And it all starts, I think, creating harmony starts with a hard commitment to the truth, really.
Mhm. Well, I really appreciate that feedback. The truth can be hard to discern for us sometimes, and I love what you said about the nature of growth. I think sometimes people think harmony is boring.
Mm,
We sit around and listen to angels play harps. How much fun is that? But in fact, no, harmony is different, I think, for each of us. But if you've lived with people who are in a lot of chaos or had them in your life, they have trouble staying on the wagon, or, they have mental challenges that require medication and they stop taking their medication. When there's a lot of chaos in your life, it's exhausting.
mhm.
And it can put at risk things you've worked hard to achieve. It can drain your bank accounts. It can destroy relationships. It can create engagement with law enforcement. And so, chaos could be fun for a wild weekend, but a life of harmony is more rewarding, and harmony looks different, I think, for each of us. I do feel it's a necessary part of growth. That young executive, she did everything so fast and so well, including her coaching, that she was made redundant in a merger. And she didn't have a lot of interaction with the CEO. It's a very big company. But as she was getting ready to depart, he called her out of the blue and said, I don't know what's happened to you, but I want you to use me as a referral. You've always been brilliant, but now you're becoming a leader. You're cooperative. You're sharing ideas with people and giving other people credit. I want to keep track of where you go. I imagine we'd work together in some future venture. It was a 306, it was just a complete turnaround. And it's nice when you get feedback that the hard work you're doing and your growth is recognized by other people. That's not often the case. But it's worth finding peace and harmony so that the growth we all are faced with is less stressful, less anxiety producing, less destructive to things and people we care about. So, yeah, I don't think harmony is boring. I think it can be very rewarding. And other people will sidle up next to you and say, how did you get through that transition and not lose your mind? How did you navigate that redundancy? Now you're out looking for work and you seem okay with it. So to well navigate life, I think an ability to create harmony goes a long way. And you might be surprised when other people say, how did you do that? So we can be an example for others. So, hey, Jonathan, do you have any more thoughts? I see you looking up and thinking.
I was thinking something practical to become more harmonious in a very incredible amount of time. I mean, by that I mean so fast, is staying true to yourself. Like, just be true to yourself, and the byproduct of being true to yourself is going to be some effortless harmony around you by doing the things that you probably don't want to do, but doing them. And also the previous step, it will put you on a very harmonious situation really fast. Staying true to yourself, it actually is, it starts working instantaneously. And because we live in a world that everything literally is connected, there's not such a thing as me from the future, me from the past. It's just everything is as of like right now, for example. So if I'm staying true to myself, it doesn't matter what happens around me. I can literally like die right now and I'm like, hey, I'm fine. I was I will die in a very harmonious way, even if like a bomb comes right now. I'll so staying true to yourself is a very practical and easy way to start experiencing a very harmonious energy around you. And it's not that complicated. It just needs a lot of attention and willpower, which I can help someone that needs to develop those kinds of things if they want, of course.
In the last week, I was telling Brian, I've had 3 different executives reach out on LinkedIn looking to polish their leader identity and their leadership presence. And so to develop an environment in their workplace where other people respect them, identify them as a leader, and will, cooperatively go in the direction they're leading. So when you have disharmony, it's harder to pull your team together, it's harder to meet your deadlines. And so the kind of mutual agreement that says, okay, you're going to lead this project and I'm going to do my part, but I'll follow your direction. So trying to create that in a workplace can take effort because all different kinds of people are on your team. And there was a giant layoff this week from Meta. I think 3,600 people were laid off. And unfortunately, the press release said we laid off 3,600 low performers and we're
Wow.
trimming the ranks of the company. Can you imagine how sort of not reading the room, maybe that
Yeah.
was? And I imagine class action lawsuits are soon to follow. But people were posting on LinkedIn, I'm an award-winning such and such. And I've only ever done well in the last 3 companies I worked for. And while I'm caught up in this layoff, I am the last thing, compared to a low performer. And so don't believe what was said. If they expanded too fast, and some companies did, and now they're having to retract, these are just economic cycles. But to label every single person they've laid off as a low performer doesn't create harmony in the workplace. Imagine the survivor's guilt that happens after layoff with the people left behind. While they were not labeled low performers, their friends and colleagues were. And now you work at a company who's willing to kind of give you a bad label to make an excuse for a business decision they have to make. And so it was very ungenerous. It was untrue. It was not politically correct. It was bad PR. But there we go. So we find disharmony in workplaces, in relationships. And Brian, I know you've spoken about vibration separation before. There's something that could have been harmonious and it's not a fit anymore. It's just not a fit anymore. The workplace, the relationship, where you play golf, whatever that is, you're ready for a change. Do you want to speak to how to create harmony in transition when you realize there's a change?
I'm not sure how to speak to that, but I did want to speak about something else
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about. Basically, what was it? I'm trying to remember now. Well, shoot, I kind of forget. But okay, vibration separation.
It'll come back to you.
I do think that's happening more now. I've noticed that just a lot more. Like, I feel like nowadays, I mean, I feel like there's just a different consciousness kind of emerging in humanity now. Sometimes now, there's like a feeling like if I say one thing, which I don't think is that big of a deal, I can just feel like this person is like done with me now. They're like done. I'm like, well, there's that. So I think there's more of that going on now. People are kind of going their own way, but honestly, ultimately that's good based on what Dean and Jonathan have said, because that means people are living in their own truth more. Like, and ultimately humanity will sort of sort itself out that way. People will form groups and go in the directions they want to go and kind of have separation harmony sometimes is what's needed. Like, you guys want to go this way, you guys want to go this way, okay. You can have harmony within your group over there, we'll have harmony within our group over here. So I do think that's going on, like you said, vibration separation. And here's what I was going to say. You were talking about how a lot of people think of harmony as boring or not exciting. I agree with that. I think that's a big problem in modern dating. A lot of people get into enjoying playing the games, like the social games, the mind games of it. And like, that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it exciting. The toxicity is what's fun about it. And if you don't do that, eh, you know, he's not interesting, she's not interesting, whatever. I think that's really taken over a lot of the dating, especially on the dating apps. And it's interesting to me how people's energies of their beliefs kind of shape their reality. Like, the actual genuine harmony can be so nice. That can be so wonderful, so lovely. Like, there can be so much happiness there. But there are a lot of people who don't know that. They have not felt that. They don't believe that exists. And they're reality box, like I was talking about before the show, in their consciousness and their perspective, it's only fun when it's kind of toxic, when it's kind of a game. That's what makes it
Mhm.
exciting. That's what gets them going, you know?
Mhm.
And it's just based on like what you've experienced. If you've never experienced harmony as a really fulfilling, wonderful thing that's like full of happiness, you don't know that. Like, so you're gonna go based off what you do know. People kind of being toxic and playing games, and that's the fun of it, and that's what you're gonna go with because you're in that reality box. So
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
yeah.
We are bringing on a new coach in the next week or so, Wendy Leggett, and she specializes in retirement coaching, not the financial side of retirement, but how to design your life in retirement. It's kind of a fit for the channel. But she talked about the change in your social resume. And I never really thought of it that way. But for instance, if you get laid off and then you have to tell people you were laid off, like what has just happened with Meta, or, anytime you're in an up or down economic cycle, you're sharing the news of the people that know you, and you have to wonder, how are they going to treat me now that they know I was a doctor, but I'm retired now? So now I'm just a guy that plays golf. Your social resume is making a transition, and you may not be able to control that, how people see you. If your primary identity was the work you did, and you don't do that work anymore, what is your identity now? And so if your social resume was, I'm an engineer at Meta, and now you're not an engineer at Meta, how do you reconstruct harmoniously how you engage with other people? Well, I have some options and I'm exploring them, or whatever that looks like. Coaching is so helpful, the different kinds of coaching that we do to help release limiting beliefs, to create internal harmony, to help you with the transitions that automatically will come in life. We are going to grow whether we like it or not. And so we may as well learn to like it. So, any thoughts, Dean or Jonathan?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think a skill that's very helpful for most people to develop is an ability to read and understand their chaos and disharmony as it
Mhm.
presents itself in their circumstances. And to try to step back from that a little bit and flip it over and ask questions from the other side.
Mhm.
So when Meta says we laid off 3,600 low performers,
Mhm.
the flip question that you want to be able to examine is what happened to Meta that they hired low performers 4,000 times in a row,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so I just think most people are tend to be so emotionally in their disharmony and chaos,
Sure.
and so reactive to it that it becomes kind of like what Brian was saying, kind of like a reality box. Their whole reality box is made up of the bad things that happened to me,
Mhm.
and they're reacting to that all the time. And they most people don't have the skill to say, what has gone on with me that I have created this situation? And Jocko Willink talks about is it what's this phrase? It's not, is it radical ownership or something like that?
Yes.
Where you're sort of trying to say, can I examine my circumstances where without denying that others have maybe um that others have behaved poorly toward me. But how did I end up in this situation? What was the path that led me here and
Mhm.
led me to these people in the first place?
Mhm.
So, yes, yeah, okay, I think Pinocchio, he goes running away from Geppetto or whatever, and he's mad, and he ends up on Pleasure Island and becomes half donkey. But in the middle, he meets the guys who take him there. So yes, those guys are tricksters. They're bad people. Okay. but what happened that led you into their orbit? And I just think that's such an important part to like establishing a harmonious life is to be able to say, to read what is happening. And like if you're the people in charge of Meta, are you able to read this not as your employee's failure, but as we have somehow created a situation where we hired low performers 4,000 times in a row, and you would think with 4,000 iterations, we ought to be able to get some sense of what we ought to do to not do that again. And that's just such an empowering approach to life that it's just absolutely critical if you want to have a more harmonious set of circumstances.
Yeah, I'd love to speak to that. You know, we know in coaching that one of the first things we offer clients is perspective. You know, we hear what's happening with them. We hear what concerns they have. We get a lay of the landscape. And our position is often different than theirs because we're not in it. We don't have emotional ties. We're not carrying the baggage. We don't have their limiting beliefs, what have you. But, you know, if you look at using Meta as an example, they have a very difficult screening process. I've coached people who got hired at Meta in these group interviews. If you're an executive, it is a gauntlet. And so they don't hire fools. I mean, I'm sure a few slip by, but there's no way they hired 3,600 low performers at Facebook. So it's just nonsensical. And but if you look at the landscape using Meta as an example, who did you meet while you were working there? What did you learn while you led your engagements? How much more do you know than you knew when you started working there? Let's just look at the Meta journey overall. Maybe the transition was managed poorly, you know, as you were made redundant. But look at what the bulk of that opportunity offered you and who you know and who you met and what you're bringing to your next opportunity. Probably some insight about managing layoffs, if nothing else, how to do that better. But, you know, I was just going to speak to you, Jonathan, when people share, I have this difficulty, I'm trying to overcome this, the other things I've tried haven't worked, you know, as a coach, it's almost always good news. Hey, we're finally down to the thing we can change so that you're going to perform better, or this is not going to be a problem for you anymore. You've asked for help and now help will be received and you're going to move past whatever this is. Do you have that experience where oh, I'm having this trouble and this trouble, and you're like, okay, let's get to work? Jonathan, do you want to speak to that?
Before I forget, I wanted to make a point on when it comes to as soon as you start being true to yourself, there's going to be, before harmony comes, disclaimer, there's going to be a lot of extra, like the most ridiculous amount of chaos that you have ever experienced in your life because you have never been true to yourself to that level. But I promise, as soon as the storm happens, you're going to experience something way like different and you're going to like it. So, and also Brian was mentioning something along the line of relationships and harmony in relationships. Obviously, it's if you are into like a girlfriend, boyfriend, or like marriage kind of relationship, harmony is it's a must have. There is no way that you can have an enjoyable relationship if you do not have as a foundation some kind of harmony. Yeah, it's fine. You can have some difficult moments, but on the side, and then you come back to the original uh, landscape, which is a harmonious state within your relationship. Now, the problem is most men do not know how to be true to themselves. Therefore, they end up in relationships where they're going to be exposed to everything but harmony. uh, uh, and it's actually kind of well, before I used to think it was sad. Now I'm getting more. I have more sense of humor. But it's still kind of sad to see that it's still happening. It is extremely important that if somebody is going to get into a relationship, they know themselves at least to the point of um, what is it that I do not want to tolerate? What is it that I love? What is it that makes me angry? What is it that makes me more lovable? And then just like the basic understandings of yourself, so that whoever comes into your journey, path, life, you can actually generate consciously a harmonious state. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, more likely the end result is going to be a chaotic relationship and chaos everywhere also. So yeah, just emphasis on understanding yourself better so that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. First things first, you're going to remember that you are responsible for like everything that is literally happening around you in one way or another. So that humbles you, and then it puts you in a very also, now that I think about it, gratitude comes into play all the time. If you have troubles, like let's say you're having a bad episode, an anxiety episode or something, or too much, some people get like a stress episodes because of the chaos that they are experiencing, because of the lack of harmony in their lives. Therefore, it is extremely important to take care of the basics. And that's what we are here for. So you, yeah, that will be my take on that part.
I appreciate that feedback. I think it's erroneous to think I'm going to go through life and never have any problems, because nobody's life operates like that. And so, there's an old story that if you put like 20 people in a room and you put your biggest problem on a piece of paper and put it in a hat, and they pass it around, and then they say, okay, pull a problem out of the hat and see if it's worse than your own problem. The majority of the time you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want that problem. Give me my problem back. I wouldn't know what to do with this at all. And you find out people have the problems they should have for the growth they need to do. And as coaches who help navigate that, that's what we see. And we always know that the problem or the challenge is pointing directly at, like, look right here, look right here. Let's work on this one thing right here. And we're like, oh, okay, thanks for putting up a big neon sign that said the part you needed to work on. Let's work on this. We're like, oh, this is great. I see just what to do. And so it can be a little bit unsettling when coaches get excited. We found the problem. Now we can solve it. So instead of, oh dear, I have this problem, we say, yes, let's solve it. And we'll move right past it together. So, well, this has been really fun, you guys. I want to go around the table, ask you any closing thoughts, and then say how people get a hold of you. Brian, can we begin with you? Closing thoughts and how to find you?
Yeah, closing thoughts. Just going off of what Jonathan was saying. I mean, I think it's so important that people figure out how to be harmonious, like in those marriages or boyfriend girlfriend relationships, because the stats on that are just so bleak now. The stats are just so bad. I mean, because over 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? But that less than 50%, not all of those are happy marriages. Let's say half of those are unhappy marriages. So right there, you're at 75% is no good.
Mm-hmm.
Then that doesn't even include how many people dated before the marriage and how many of those relationships didn't work out. I mean, if you include that, we're talking 90+% of the time, these relationships aren't really working out. I mean, it really is. Now you can have good experiences along the way, you can learn along the way. Like there's that, but still, most of these relationships are not working out today. It's not working out. Like in Western culture in general. I mean, to some extent, it's a problem all over the world, but specifically US, Europe. I mean, there's just a lot of issues with this stuff. So, yeah, I think it's really important that something be done to address that, at least for the children that come out of these relationships. The next generation is raised in a somewhat decent manner. Something has to be done to address that, I think. So, yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to say. So, yeah, you can reach me at alifedesign.org or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
Cool. Hey, thank you so much. Jonathan, any final thoughts and how do we get a hold of you?
I was thinking something funny actually, because no girlfriend. If someone comes to me and tells me, "Oh, I want to have a girlfriend, and that's my problem," I'll be like, "Okay, you have one problem. No girlfriend. If I get you a girlfriend, you're gonna have 10,000 problems. So are you ready for those?" That's sometimes only one problem is better. So you can find me at alifedesign.org, also Jonathan R. Coaching on Instagram, jonathanrcoaching@gmail.com, and also on TikTok is the same as well, Jonathan R. Coaching.
Very good. Well, I'll include those links in our show notes. And Dean, final thoughts and how to get a hold of you.
I think that I would say the most important thing, if you're thinking about harmony or peace is to you want to move it toward those things. The most important thing you can do is value them, and that many people struggle simply because they don't consciously value peace and harmony in their lives.
Mhm.
And they like Brian was saying, they may value playing games. They may they may not even know what their values are because they're just living out whatever traumatic programming was stuck into them, right? But that to self-consciously value, say, this is important to me. How do I move toward it in some small way? And to really orient your being, your choosing toward peace and harmony. I think that's the first step for people. You find me at deanabbott.com or just at deanabbott on Twitter are the easiest ways.
Oh, very good. Well, I'll include that in the show notes too. It was great to have this conversation. We encourage you to create harmony in your life, all the sectors. Try it out for yourself, and we'll see you all next time.